In January, we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. He was a minister, a social activist who led the civil rights movement in the United States from the mid-1950s until his assassination in 1969. His leadership was vital to the civil rights movement's success by the use of nonviolent tactics. He gave many monumental speeches, one in particular, the I Have a Dream speech, which was done on the massive March on Washington in 1963. This helped achieve civil rights. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, and he accomplished so much more. Martin Luther King Jr. was born to Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King on January 15, 1929. His name was originally Michael King Jr. His father adopted the name Martin Luther King in honor of the German Protestant religious leader Martin Luther, who broke away from the Catholic Church. King later followed his father's lead and adopted the name also. King came from a middle-class family rooted in traditional Southern values. His father and maternal grandfather were preachers as well. His parents were college educated, and he grew up in a prosperous environment full of family and love. His father became pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta after his maternal grandfather died. In 1944, at age 15, King entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. He graduated from Morehouse in 1948. He also went to earn a bachelor in divinity in 1951. He later went to Boston University and received a doctorate in 1955. There in Boston is where he met Coretta Scott. She was studying at the New England Conservatory of Music. He fell in love and they were married in 1953. King was now a married man. Him and his wife had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. King was living a dream of his own, but he wasn't happy. He wanted to help others, as well as his children, see and live in a better world. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great leader, even at a young age. Besides being a pastor, King was chosen to lead the Montgomery Improvement Association. They led the legendary boycott of the bus transit system. King's ability to skillfully inspire was now shown to the world. There were many attempts to stop King from doing what was right. His home was bombed. His family was threatened. However, the boycott continued, and 1 year later, the bus transit system was desegregated. King organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. King was convinced that nonviolent resistance was going to be their weapon of choice to overcome racism and segregation. In 1960, King moved to Atlanta and became co-pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. There he supported a sit-in with local demonstrators and black leaders and was arrested. This would not be the only time King would be arrested and put in jail. By then, King was well known across the country, and the then Democratic presidential candidate John F. Kennedy interceded to help his release. John F. Kennedy sometime later became president of the United States of America. Martin Luther King Jr. began to influence not just Black Americans, but all people. People who saw his fight was just and right began to follow not only Black Americans, no matter their race, creed, or color. From sit-ins, marching, and other protests, people took notice. However, the fight wasn't easy. It was often painful. And there were blood, sweat, and tears that were shed. Even though these were peaceful and nonviolent protests, many endured being bitten by dogs, water hoses turned on them, and angry mobs abused them. Often, there were children that endured these same hard trials. In jail, he wrote letters explaining his reasoning and his hope. But he was determined. King joined other civil rights leaders to organize a historic march on Washington to demand equal justice under the law. On August 28, 1963, the historic and peaceful march is where King gave his powerful "I Have a Dream" speech. Afterwards, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act authorized the federal government to enforce desegregation of public accommodations and outlawing discrimination in publicly owned facilities as well as employment. Martin Luther King Jr. received the Nobel Peace Prize in December of that year. King led many marches in the following year, in which led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Although King's approach was successful, some thought he could have been more aggressive. King also met with other leaders of the time, such as Malcolm X. King began to speak out against other issues besides racism and segregation. He spoke against the Vietnam War and began to tackle poverty. He also planned a Poor People's Campaign. They planned to march on Washington as well, but it never happened. On April 4th, 1969, King was assassinated. Many were saddened. Years later, in 1983, Coretta Scott King participated in the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington. This led to legislation on November 3rd, 1983, to establish Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to be celebrated every year on the third Monday in January. King's life and work has reached many until this day. We celebrate the life God allowed him to live and the work that was accomplished because of his dedication. Our generation is standing on the shoulders of Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders like him. We thank God for this opportunity that we have, that so many fought for and even died for. I end by asking a question. How has his dream become a reality in your life? Or has it?